I'm Cienna.
Oh no, I missed it. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, I'm Cienna.
And I'm Madison.
And you're listening. Hey, I'm Cienna.
And I'm Madison.
I'm sorry. Yelling at them.
This is really embarrassing. Okay, here we go.
Hi, I'm Cienna.
And I'm Madison.
And you're listening to the Just a Person podcast.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Just a Person podcast, a show that explores life's highs, lows, and in-betweens. I'm Madison, and today Cienna and I are talking to our friend Sara. Sara talks to us about her parents' journey to America, her experience growing up in the United States and Brazil, how multiple cultures influenced her worldviews, and the importance of family no matter the distance. Thanks for listening and enjoy. Hey guys.
Hey, what's up?
Hey.
Sara, welcome to our podcast.
Thanks for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Before we even get started, I just want to say that we have a special connection because we share the same exact birthday.
This is true.
I've never met someone, we're born to the year, exact same.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes, it's crazy. I've never had that.
Why did I think we were the same age? I always think things that aren't correct. So wait, do you mind sharing the birth date?
It's August 18th.
Yep.
Okay. Make sure to wish them happy birthday, everyone.
Okay.
For real. Our birthday's important over here.
All right. So I'm going to pick the question out of the hat and then we're all going to answer it starting with you, Sara. Sound good?
Sweet.
Okay. I think this is an appropriate question because you are an RA at school. When people come to you for help, what are they coming for?
It really varies just depending on who it is in my life. But I would say being an RA, the vast majority of people come to me about just mental health things that they're experiencing personally and emotionally, things happening in their home life. I would say that's the majority of what I hear when people come to me venting about maybe it's an ex-boyfriend, or maybe it's they don't want to move back home. Maybe they've had a history of depression and anxiety that they've dealt with. So that's mainly what people come to me about.
Do you feel comfortable talking about that stuff with people?
Honestly, I always have been, just because I come from such a big family and my sisters are really open with me. And so I'm really used to helping people through things. Also, I think a lot of that stems from being a middle child. I've always been kind of put in the middle of situations. I feel like I'm always in the middle of chaos. So I definitely feel comfortable when people come to me about that stuff. I don't always feel like I have the answers. I just feel like I have a pretty calm presence. So it's usually a comfortable situation.
Okay, that's so funny because I'm also the middle child. So same thing. I feel like with my siblings, it's always so much chaos and I'm always kind of the calm. I've been told, can be calming, even though I don't see myself that way. But yeah, I also don't have great advice, but I've been told I'm a good listener, which I think it's kind of the most important. I feel like just being there for someone and hearing them is usually enough. They just want people just want to be supported.
Yes, they just want to be heard. And honestly, your presence without even knowing is enough.
I was gonna say, you are such a chill, calming person. I feel like if I needed advice, I would go to Sara too. I can see why so many people go to you.
Yeah, for sure.
Aw. I feel like a lot of people in my life I feel that way about too. And it's so nice to have people like that to go to that you can go to. So yeah, I'm so glad I had you guys as residents and I was able to form that bond with you guys too. So that firsthand, that experience with me.
I think for me, similar with my friends for that kind of thing. I think with my family though, it's a lot more if they need something, they need someone to do something, they come to me for that. My parents or my brother or just my cousins and stuff, they just come to me more if they need a babysitter or someone to help them move, whatever, just if they need help with something.
Yeah, I don't get that as often.
Yeah, more practicality and they trust you with tasky things. That makes sense. That's definitely up your alley, Madison.
Thanks. Okay. So you have a little bit of a wild story. You've been, kind of all over the place. Why don't you just tell us, I guess, let's just start out with your parents. Where were your parents born? What's their journey like?
So my mom was born in Brazil and my dad was born in Lebanon, but my entire like ancestry comes from Lebanon. So even my mom's parents were born in Lebanon, my dad's parents were born in Lebanon, and the only portion of me that's really Brazilian is the fact that my mom was born in Brazil. So I do take on a lot of like Brazilian culture just because my sisters and I, we spent a lot of our childhood in Brazil. So we grew up in Brazil, and that was just because our family lived there and my dad had a job there at the time. But my mom actually, before she even had kids, she ended up moving to Lebanon with her parents, and that's where she met my dad. And so they got engaged in Lebanon. My dad moved to the US and started making money so that he could pay for the wedding. And so he was literally sending my mom money while he was in the US. She was planning like all the wedding details. And then they ended up getting married in Lebanon. And then they moved to the US to have kids so that we would be US citizens and be able to get an education here. But we ended up moving to Brazil. We spent like most of grade school in Brazil. And then they moved us back here so that my dad could have a better job and that we could have a better education once we entered college. So that was like pretty much like a rundown of what the experience kind of was like. But yeah, I don't know if you want me to like elaborate on anything.
Why did your mom move back to Lebanon?
My mom moved to Lebanon because her parents wanted her to find a Druze man. So our culture, we're Lebanese, but our religion that we follow is Druze. It's Druze. It's a very small population in Lebanon that's actually Druze, but pretty much it's like we really value carrying on that culture and that religion. And so her parents wanted her to find somebody. So that's why she moved to Lebanon with them. And so she ended up finding someone. Obviously, she literally got engaged 2 weeks after they met. So it was a very quick thing.
Wait, so how old were your parents when they got married?
I want to say my mom was like 24. Yeah, it was like a reasonable age.
Yeah.
They actually didn't start having kids till they were like reaching their 30s. My dad was like mid 30s.
And wait, what did you exactly say a Druze man was?
It's more of like a belief system than anything else. Unless you commit yourself to the religion, you're not really like studying it in detail. It's more of like a culture and a belief system than anything else.
Is there anything as a Druze woman, or is it only a man thing?
So it's both. Yeah, it's both. I guess I will say there's different social expectations for both. It's a very like traditional religion. The men are like the head of the household kind of tradition.
Okay, so was your mom a Druze woman or no?
Yeah, so where we come from like a Druze religion, but unless you commit yourself to the religion, you're not like, I don't want to relate it to a different religion, but it's kind of like you can follow Buddhism traditions and culture, but unless you like actually commit yourself to that religion, you're not like a Buddhist monk. You're not committing yourself fully unless if you are a Buddhist monk, you're actually practicing like it is very brutal. Like it's not like all cut and dry like how people think it is. It's the same thing with like Druze religion. Like you become what they call a sheikh, where you're wearing certain things, you're practicing very strictly. Like it's more like ritual, it's more stern in like the way that you practice that religion. We're not like that extreme, but we still identify as that.
Okay, so is anybody in your family like follows a religion, or is it all just you kind of do the cultural stuff?
Yeah, none of us really follow it to that extent, but yeah, we still identify as it. Yep.
Do you identify as well?
That's a whole story, but I will say I do and I don't. I don't agree with everything.
Okay, because I always thought you were just kind of like, I don't know, like didn't identify as really anything super strongly. You just always seemed very open to like everything.
Yeah, I'm studying Buddhism actually right now, which is why I brought that up, and I'm learning a lot about that. So I definitely am super open-minded.
What was it like for you growing up in America with immigrant parents that had kind of lived in different parts of the world? Like, not that your mom was from Brazil and then she moved to Lebanon and then she moved here and your dad moved here just to work. And what was that like?
It was honestly really challenging because there's a lot of American expectations and traditions that they didn't really understand. Honestly, to this day, we don't understand because we were never taught it. We just saw it, like observed it in school and stuff. But I would say something that stands out to me is the application process for college. They didn't know how that worked and they still don't know how that works. And everything we had to figure out by ourselves pretty much. So it was definitely challenging. Another part that's challenging is like obviously the social aspect aspect of it. My parents are very out there and they don't really have a filter, not in a bad way, but it's just how they were raised. It's just how they are. And I think that a lot of people love it and they think it's really neat. And like, they'll be like, oh my God, I love your mom. She's so crazy. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Like, honestly, it's just people don't usually get like offended or anything by it, but it's definitely like when you're growing up, it can be tricky to navigate sometimes.
Yeah, maybe when you're a bit younger, especially where you're like, ooh, like, mom, like, no, that's funny. See, yeah, when I met your mom, I loved her. I instantly loved her. She was so sweet. Didn't she like give us like chocolate?
Yeah, she was the nicest person I've ever met.
Yes, she was so, so sweet to us.
She was like giving us hugs, giving us food.
Yes, she really admires, like, honestly, physical touch is like her love language. She'll just hug anyone, doesn't matter who it is.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she was just like hyping us up. She was just, I remember, just so nice.
Yeah, she was giving us so many compliments. Like,
Yes, and like we were doing the bare minimum, like, and she was just so sweet. I was like, aw.
I love that.
all right, so I'm gonna quickly run through your timeline of how you were growing up because it's a little confusing. I don't want people to get lost in the mix as we continue. So you were born in Michigan and you moved to Brazil when you were 2, and then you moved back to Michigan a year later until you were 6. And then when you were 6, you moved to Brazil until you were 10. From 10 to 16, you lived in Michigan, and then at 16, you moved back to Brazil for a few months. That's all correct?
That's all correct.
What was it like going back and forth? I mean, the language is different, the culture is different. What was that like moving back and forth so much?
Honestly, I kind of just like went with the flow. I'm not gonna lie. I don't want to say I was very adaptable back then because I was really young and I actually just had no idea what was going on, but it wasn't that bad because we had a lot of family support. And when I did end up moving here, I feel like I made a lot of friends and I had a good support system here. And if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have been okay, to be honest. But the language part of it, my parents did make it a point to raise us bilingually. So we didn't really struggle moving back and forth. It was okay. I think what was most hard was being separated from my family, being with them, then not being with them, and then being with them again, and then having to say goodbye again. And that for me is like the hardest part because we're really close with our family, especially our first cousins. They're all in Brazil. And honestly, even not being separated from each other, but then knowing that I was going to have to say goodbye again at some point, that was always really hard for me growing up because we were just so attached to each other. Like we're all so close. So I've learned how to say goodbyes and I've learned that separation is really hard from family, but it honestly has made us appreciate each other more and it's made us closer. And I know a lot of people say that long distance is really hard to like maintain relationships, but that hasn't been my experience at all.
So are you the only, like your parents and you and your siblings, are you the only people who now live in the United States?
Yeah, my sisters and I actually recently talked about this. We're actually the first generation of our ancestors to even be born in America and go to school in America. So we're the only family right now from Brazil that lives here, but I do have 2 uncles from Lebanon that moved here. But other than that, yeah, we were the first ones here. So
Do your cousins or aunts and uncles think anything of that, like what your life in the States is like, or the fact that you live here?
I think that many of them are curious as to what life is like here. A lot of them haven't visited, some have, but I would say that there's a very large population of people, especially in the Middle East, that want to someday leave the Middle East and come to the United States because they know how great education and life is here in comparison to the Middle East and everything they're going through. So I would say they definitely live vicariously through us. And then my family in Brazil, I would say that for the few of them that have visited, they love it here and they want to come back, but it's more of a money issue and like kind of like finding out the right time to come here because all of them are still in school and school in Brazil and Lebanon are very vigorous. So it's hard for them to leave and find time to come here.
When you're moving back and forth from Brazil to Michigan, are you living in like the same neighborhood? So there's the same people around?
Yeah, we stayed in the same house that we were renting, but when I got to high school, we moved houses. So that part of my life was really complicated because we were moving houses and then we were still traveling. We were still like going back and forth. So when I was younger, that time span between 10 to 16, we were living in the same house, but then after that, it got really chaotic. So that part was weird, but what stayed the same was obviously our like circle of people and it was still okay. It was just a matter of the move being chaotic and traveling to still see family.
Which culture did you feel like you best fit into?
Wow, that's a hard question.
Or did you not feel like you fit into either of them?
That's an even harder question. I think that the culture that is most prevalent in my life is probably actually what my family eats the most, like food wise, is Lebanese food. And that's like a huge part of our culture is Lebanese food. But I want to say, like, in terms of what I identify with most is Brazil or Brazilian culture, just because that's the language I can speak and I can communicate with my family in Portuguese. Whereas Arabic is not a language that I can speak very well. It's a language I understand. Like, I can understand it, but I can't translate it, so it's a little harder in that sense. And I wouldn't say I am closer with my Brazilian family, but I will say I grew up with them. So I do feel closer in that sense to them, where like I spent my childhood with them. But yeah, I would say food is a huge part of both cultures, but I do know that like my family mainly cooks Lebanese meals. So it's definitely like a mix. It's a huge mix. I think the growing up in Brazil aspect of it definitely helps me identify more with that culture.
Is your family in Brazil mostly identifying with Lebanese culture as well? Like they cook a lot of Lebanese food. So it's more like those traditions are carrying over as opposed to adopting more of the traditions of the country that you're in?
Yes, that is literally, you just hit it on the head. I feel like because the religion itself is not studied, we don't study it as much, but it's more the culture, more of like a way of life than anything else. It's the food and like the music and the dancing. And that's like what we all like are a part of. We all identify as Lebanese. And that's like our main ethnicity. But I think that other than that, it's mainly like that food aspect of it. And like they all still identify as Lebanese, even though they were born in Brazil. Yeah, that's still the culture that they follow, just because my grandparents and their grandparents are all from Lebanon. And they still visit Lebanon and all of our families in Lebanon as well. So it's complicated, but yes.
I guess I don't know the main differences. Could you give like an example of how they're different?
Yeah, Lebanese culture, or like honestly, many Middle Eastern cultures are, oh man, I don't want to like shame any culture. Like it's my culture, but I also want to like just be straight up and honest that Lebanese culture is very at times materialistic and can be judgmental because they care a lot about like your societal status, how people view your family unit. That's very much Lebanese culture. How you appear in public and how you appear to like society is a huge thing and like very valued. And I will say that's the main thing that stands apart between the two. Brazilian culture is very accepting. Everyone's so open and kind, and it's all like festivals and bonding around food. And even though Lebanon is also a lot of bonding around food, I think that Brazilian people, there's a lot of poverty. And I think that they value kind of that family unit and like cooking. Like I said, there is a lot of poverty in Brazil, a lot of crime. That's something that you see a lot of is like more of like a collectivist culture in terms of that.
Even in the United States, I feel like the way you dress, it doesn't necessarily ever need to be presentable. If you go out in sweatpants and a hoodie, nobody really thinks anything of it. Whereas even in cultures in like Europe, you like aren't supposed to do that. It's kind of considered rude. Not even you need to look a certain way, but just like putting effort into your appearance is important.
When you were moving back and forth, did you ever feel like you were being judged by the other kids because you were doing things differently? Or maybe just because you're Lebanese that you felt like the other kids thought you were weird or something?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, especially when I first got here, I actually have like a vivid memory of my first day in class and I didn't know the national anthem. There was so many little things that I didn't know and people thought I was so weird for not knowing those things. And also when we would say the Pledge of Allegiance, like I didn't know it at first and I always was judged for that. Just people thought I was kind of strange. My last name kind of strange. People would make up weird names for it and call me weird things. So yeah, I definitely felt judged at first, especially just because we were so young, like at that time. And I just think that people weren't very culturally aware or they were just, hooligan kids that didn't care what they said or. So yeah, at first for sure. And then it kind of like died down once I got older and made good friends.
If you would have just lived here or just Brazil, and I guess you probably wouldn't have visited the US, but if you lived in the US and you just visited Brazil, visited Lebanon, do you think that your view on things would be really different? Or do you think you'd be kind of the same? Like wherever you're living, you are kind of following your Lebanese culture and that kind of thing.
I definitely think my views would have been different. I feel like I may have not have gained as good of an understanding of the cultures and it would have been hard for me to adapt, I feel like, to those cultures. But I feel like because my parents exposed us to them so much and we grew up around it, it made it so that Like they're both very different cultures. And unless like you're a part of the in-group of that culture, it's hard to understand it. And I feel like being around it helped me. Like it helped me not create like a judgment around it. And I do still think there's a lot that both cultures have that are flawed or like they need to work on. But I think any culture has that, and just it helped me appreciate like the good parts of it.
Now that you're in college and you're getting married and stuff, do you think that you'll stay here or do you want to move somewhere else?
That is a great question. Honestly, that's a podcast in and of itself. Me marrying outside of my religion is that's a huge thing. And kind of like what I said, like about how Lebanese people really, especially if you're Druze Lebanese, really value keeping within that same religion and marrying within the religion. And obviously that did not work out for me. And that's just because of us living here at an older age and not moving back to Lebanon and not like having as many Druze people around us. I ended up meeting somebody and I don't have any regrets. And I think that it's a part of the culture, like I said, that is flawed. And I think there's more people that are starting to realize that. My family has been very accepting, thankfully. There are people in the religion that will shun you if you do marry outside of the religion. And I fully embrace that. And if you shun me, then you don't care about me. That's my point of view. Like if you shun me, you're not my family. If you know that I love this person, you will be happy for me. So there's a lot to it. And I don't think that we would ever live outside of the US. I know for a fact that we've talked about it, that I want him to visit and like get to know the culture, but just based on like what our vision is for the future, I think that we both kind of agreed the US it's a good place to have a family. And it's not that we wouldn't live somewhere, maybe temporarily, but I don't think long-term we would. I think maybe the only possibility would be Brazil, but in the Middle East, probably not.
Do you want to go back to when you first started dating your now fiance? Because you guys have been together a while. So how old were you when you guys first started dating?
I think I was maybe 16.
And so were you the first person in your family to date outside of your religion?
So we all dated. None of us had like very serious relationships. My older sister did, but that was, oh gosh, I guess the timing of that was kind of different. But yeah, I guess my older sister and I were kind of both at the same place where we were both starting serious relationships. My older sister actually was in a serious relationship before me. And one of our cousins actually did marry someone who was Christian, and she did get shunned by my family. So that was kind of a fear. You're both like, okay, well, we're both done for it, so it's fine. But it worked out. It's okay. And my parents had a hard time with it at first, especially my dad, but they worked through it and we just kind of had to nurture them. We were like, you raised us here, like when we were older, like, what do you expect? We don't have a lot of Druze people around us. This is what it is. So
would you be expected to, once you're of a certain age, would you be expected to move back to Lebanon to find someone?
I guess like if I weren't with somebody right now, yeah, at some point it probably would have been expected. I guess my parents I won't say they did a poor job, but I will say they didn't lay out exactly what they were expecting of us, or else I probably would have been more intentional about maybe trying not to meet somebody or maybe planning to like go after graduation to Lebanon. But they kind of just like, it was more of like a in the back of their mind expectation that they never really expressed with us as much as they should have. And that's why I feel like even though they had a hard time with it, they were more adaptable because they realized it is something they put us in, if that makes sense. It's complicated, but I don't really know what would have happened. Like, I don't know if I would have moved to Lebanon or if I would have intentionally tried to meet somebody. It's something I wanted to honor, but I knew that it would be very slim of a chance.
So since you were kind of raised with like a Lebanese background, but grew up and spent a lot of time in the United States, do you identify like more strongly with being like the American culture or like more so with your parents?
It's really hard. I want to say, I would say a lot of people who are like kind of like an American mix, like Arab American, Korean American, like whatever sort of like mix that you have, it can sometimes be confusing to like what you identify with. But I will say that I have grown to understand American culture a lot. I feel like I have an equal understanding of like all three of them. And for me, I identify very equally with both, honestly. I will say we don't celebrate American things pretty much ever, unless it's like maybe with friends or like something we acknowledge, but it's not something we do because we're here. I don't know how to really explain that, but yeah, we definitely carry more like Lebanese culture with us than anything else.
I think that's really cool. I guess, do you have any favorite Lebanese Christians that you participate in?
Something I really love that like Lebanese people value is just like dancing. Like we have so much fun, like especially at like events we do a dance. It's called depki. It's such a simple dance, but it's the most lively thing that happens. It's so much fun. And yeah, I will say that like nightlife in Lebanon and like dancing and food is the main thing that stands out. So I would say that's my favorite traditional thing. I would say like other traditional things that there are, which I haven't yet experienced, is like weddings are huge in Lebanon. When you get married, the whole town is involved. I won't obviously have that same experience since I'm not in Lebanon, but there's definitely aspects of weddings that will be carried over and celebrated. So that'll be interesting to experience.
If you had the opportunity, I know you can't really go there right now, but if you had the opportunity, would you get married in Lebanon and here, or is it different because you're not marrying a Lebanese man?
If I had the choice, I would get married in Lebanon 100% because I've just experiencing weddings there. It's always something I grew up wanting, but because it didn't work out that way and I'm not marrying a Lebanese man, I wouldn't want to put him in that position, if that makes sense, just because of kind of what we were talking about earlier. People really care about like societal status and they'll know immediately that it's a small town. Like usually it's a town celebration. They know what last name is whose family and what town they're from. And because he doesn't have that, it wouldn't be celebrated, if we're being honest, just based on like kind of my experience with it. I don't think it would be as celebrated. And it's sad. It's very sad. And I wish it wasn't that way, but it is. And I think that there's other ways though that we can still integrate the culture without having to physically be there. So I'm just trying to like stay focused on that. And it's never something that's bothered me like that much, but it's definitely something that I've thought about a lot.
Does all of your family like plan on coming to the States for your wedding? Do you know?
Yeah, so we're kind of like, obviously with COVID, it's really hard to tell like what's going to happen if they'll be able to travel here. But yeah, the goal is that at least like my really close family members are able to make it. And I really hope that they can. It is a year out. So they know about it. And it's just something we'll have to wait and see, because if they can't travel because of COVID, then it's different. But we're hoping that things are a little bit better by then.
Do you have any advice for people that are first generation kids from immigrant parents?
I would say something that's really helped me being here is having a close relationship with my friends' parents. If I know that's really random, but having a relationship with my friends' parents and grandparents actually has given me almost like American parents, like has allowed me to like get advice and insight from them. Not that I don't appreciate my own parents' insight, but they have experiences here that I wouldn't have been able to get from my parents. So that would be honestly my biggest advice, is just make connections here. Find like people that you can look up to, whether it's like a parent, guardian, faculty, teacher, whatever it may be, whoever it may be. It's very helpful in like trying to navigate like maybe a transition that you're going through or questions you might have.
Because I feel like your parents would be very insightful, obviously, about their own traditions and whatnot. But when they're still trying to navigate it themselves. And so that is actually, I feel like a lot of people wouldn't think about like other people's parents. But yeah, that's probably a very good resource.
Yeah, for sure. It's been very helpful.
Is there anything else you want to just like say, any remarks or anything?
I guess like I will say like it's really nice to talk about this, because I feel like I never talk about this kind of stuff, and I think that there should be more conversation for around just multicultural individuals, people who are biracial. I think that there is a lack of that, especially for people who are raised in America but identify with a different culture, like their family, like they have immigrant parents, or like maybe they were raised both here and there. So I think there should be definitely more conversation around that.
Yeah, I agree. So I feel like you were great to come on and share your perspective, because it really is interesting, like how you lived in like multiple different places and so back and forth. So I feel like you definitely had a lot of good information to share. Would you change anything, or are you happy with how everything turned out?
The only thing I think I would say I would change is I wish that, and I think COVID has like it's a very large part of it as of right now, because we were planning to go and see family. I would say like, I just kind of wish within the last few years, things in the Middle East would have been better, and that I would have been able to see my family like a little more recently, just with all of the transitions I'm going through now with going to grad school and getting married. I just think that it's so chaotic right now that any time before now would have been a good time to see them. I would say that's the only thing I'd change. I feel like we always pick the worst times to go. And that's always been the case. And we've always gone anyways, even though it's been really dangerous to go, we still go. I feel like we're very bad planners when it comes to like visiting each other. And it just always ends up working out that way. But yeah.
I was going to ask, have you ever like while you've been there, like experienced a dangerous situation?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I have. I'll just tell you one story. When I was living in Brazil specifically, my mom would always watch the garage door close, like when she was pulling into our driveway. Brazil's enclosed by walls. You can't even really see any houses. It's either gated or it's all walls, and you have to have like a passcode to get in because like this kind of stuff happens. I always thought that it was just like kind of funny and like it was almost like mysterious. I thought it was like as a kid like something that I like went along with, and I was just, oh, my mom thinks this is gonna happen. But then one day the garage was closing and we were pulling into the driveway, and I saw a guy sneaking underneath the garage door, and then he went up into my grandparents' house and my grandparents got robbed. So that happened when I think I was maybe 8 years old. So it's definitely common in Brazil. It happened to my aunt actually like a few weeks after that. She like had someone like break into her house, grabbed her purse, and like literally ran. In Brazil, what I notice more is it's more robbery and crime in that sense than it is violence, because people are living in poverty and they just need resources and they just need money. So they'll literally just rob you and leave. And that's just been my experience. Like, I don't know if things are looking different right now, but I've never actually seen any violent behavior. Whereas Lebanon is kind of like the exact opposite.
So he basically just like came in as the garage was closing.
Yes, and that's always what happens. They sneak in like right at the last minute. It's crazy. So you always have to watch.
I feel like here, I don't think I close my garage. I close the door. You know what I mean? I walk right in.
Yeah, exactly. You don't even think about it.
A lot of people don't even lock their doors. I do because I'm scared and paranoid.
Exactly. Oh, I always say that. I'm like, you don't lock your door? Like,
Yeah, I definitely lock all my doors.
Yeah, my mom's got this house on lockdown at all times.
So many people don't. They just don't.
Yeah, I don't trust anybody. You never know.
I don't trust anyone. I'm staying safe.
All right, Sarah. Well, thanks so much for being on the show.
thank you so much, you guys. I had so much fun.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it a lot.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
See you guys.
Thanks so much again to Sarah for being on our show today. If you have a story you want to personally share on the show or want us to read on air, find us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at JustAPersonPod, or send us an email at justapersonpod@gmail.com. And we'll see you next Monday with another new episode.